Without further ado, it's my wonderful privilege to introduce our guest speaker for this morning, Trent Yeo. Trent is tackling a topic that for me personally I'm really excited about. One of those ideas that for a country like New Zealand and an industry that we know is really important, like tourism, where we presume things are looking glorious and so the future will paint a wonderful picture. But Trent's going to pose some interesting questions. What happens when your brand promise doesn't meet your brand delivery? Do we have an issue in the future around sustainability? Is capability or capacity actually the key issue underlying this particular industry? And one of the things that he will explore for us is what happens when you look at the words like disruption and infrastructure, in this case, our wonderful green infrastructure that surrounds us and in plenty throughout New Zealand. And can the two coexist, or is there an issue ahead of us? Trent is the organiser of TEDx in Queenstown. He is the executive director of Ziptrek Ecotours, based in Queenstown, has come up to be part of this morning. Without further ado, I will hand over. And what I will also explain is on the Moby site that you came in with, you'll have a panel such as this. And so there are two ways to ask questions this morning of Trent. One is to put your hand up, and the other is to ask the question field through to me, and then I can do the interrupting on your behalf. So Trent, thanks mate for making time. Welcome in.
Cheers, man. Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you, Dunedin, for getting up so early. I hope you've had a coffee or whatever gets you going in the morning, because I'd like to take you on a small roller coaster, and I hope not to make you too sick. I'm going to cover a few different areas of significant interest for me in relation to tourism, but also in relation to the world in which we live in now as well. I'd like to start with this.
Legend says this land was hauled from the ocean like a giant fish. And then it waited. In fact, these islands waited until every other country had been discovered before any human ever set foot here. Welcome to the youngest country on earth.
Can you imagine when this race is run? Turn our golden faces into the sun. Forever young, I wanna be forever young. Do you really wanna live forever? Forever, forever.
So we could probably just volume down a little bit as I talk a bit over this. So this is what New Zealand looked like in 2007. It's probably similar to what it looks like now. This is one of my favourite ads from Tourism New Zealand. For me, it really sort of captured everything that I thought about New Zealand when I moved here. I love the sort of simpleness and almost a naive view of the world. I love this concept of being forever young. It is the last place on earth habited by humans. And as a person who grew up in Australia with the longest continuing culture of humans, with Australian Aboriginals, I think it's an amazing contrast in such close proximity. I think it's a beautiful ad, and it, so for me, captures a lot of emotion. And I'll talk to you about the emotion of tourism in a moment. So just a briefer, I am kind of, as I've alluded to, from all over the place. I have an Australian accent, even though I'm really not a very good swimmer. I look Asian, and as somebody pointed out to me in China, you're like the worst Chinese person I've known when we go to order something. my dad's Malaysian, and I grew up with a lot of Eastern as well as Western philosophical views of the world, particularly around education, theory, creativity, all sorts of different stuff. So I'm a bit of a mixer, and so don't judge me. This is not specifically about me, but I thought it was kind of funny. He's black, white, and Asian. I'm not so much chubby, but we'll get into that later. So I'd like to take you once again, we're going to start our roller coaster from a larger than tourism view. It is what is called the experience economy. Has anyone heard the term experience economy or used that before? Yep. Okay. So I think it's a really interesting thing. I think that tourism, and then we extend that into travel, and then we extend that into all sorts of other stuff, it's really important to rephrase what we're delivering in terms of experience. So the experience economy, I'm moving a little bit fast. Pine and Gilmore talked about this idea that things were, something simple like a commodity was delivered or a service was rendered. But I think that as you go further up the scale, it becomes an experience, it becomes a memory. And then possibly can we move into the idea that what we do in terms of service delivery becomes a transformation? Now, I believe that we should always aim as high as we can to make sure we can deliver the best thing that we can deliver. And I think it sort of leads to that sort of idea. So the experience economy could be lots of things. Some people say tourism and travel is just something with a layer of travel anyway. So people in a restaurant, people who are working at a train station, everyone is in the delivery of a service and therefore could be tourism or travel. This leads me to another concept here, and you may also have seen this.
Dad, Billy Scott says his batch is better than ours.
Oh, yeah? Why is that then?
Because he's right on the beach, and we're way up on the hill.
Well, you get a nice view when you're up high.
When the road gets dark, just let my love throw a spark. Have a little faith in
You first.
Geronimo! Woohoo! Molly!
We believe if you can dream it, you can do it.
So I love to see people's reaction to this. I think that a lot of people will step back in time when they see an ad like this, to their first memories of a flying fox, to just doing stuff when you're a kid and you can get away with it. I like to do that as an adult too, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. Once again, around the time when I was arriving into New Zealand, I saw this ad and I thought, this is the place that I could do what I want to do, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. So once you see this is another view of the whole value chain. This is a pyramid, and we'll move up from functional to, sorry, just let it run through. You can have a look at those different elements, to emotional, to also life-changing, and then transformational. These are aspects and other ways in which to think about an experience. And I think that, there's a lot of reminiscing when we see an advertisement like that. But what else could we do with our tourism experiences? And so that's what I'm going to lead into. But in other context, we've got some big stuff happening in terms of the world. So once again, not only affecting tourism, but business, and then specifically our lives. So it goes from broad to sort of very personal. The rise of Asia. So you've probably seen a map or an idea like this. This is the economic centre of the Earth. Now that's a theoretical thing because there's no centre of the Earth for economics. But moving from the Middle East, Industrial Revolution really punching straight across to what we call the West during the Industrial Revolution, and now speedily moving back to the East, and we'll probably move a little bit further as it goes. Now this map's probably already wrong. It's probably 5 years old. But it basically is an idea that these the rising middle class in the big countries, China, Indonesia, India, also particularly growth economically in the Middle East. These things are affecting things so significantly. And the thing about it is that maybe people haven't realised is that New Zealand is somewhere strategically placed right at the edge of Asia and kind of in between South America. So we're kind of jammed amongst some pretty big growth. And that's why New Zealand is set to be one of the places that will see that traffic going across it and or to it. There's other reasons traffic will come to New Zealand. So this is some flight information data and just gives you a sense of scale of where the growth has been. This is the last 10 years of growth in aviation. And the significant part of the growth has been in Asia Pacific. You can see it's significantly more than anything else. Actually, the Middle East and Asia Pacific are the two largest growth areas. But these things will affect not only travel to New Zealand, but also our view and our travel to other places. And increasingly more people going to travel to Asia. Like, who's been to Asia in the last year? A handful of you guys, yeah. Is anyone planning to go on a holiday or work to Asia in the next year? Yep, yep. Definitely go do it, because you can't really understand sense of scale until you actually see it with your own eyes, I think. So in terms of the scale of things, New Zealand tourism was around $12 billion, a bit less than $12 billion last financial year. In the Asia Pacific region, 437 billion, and that's just actually in airline movements. That's not tourism general. But I just wanted to just give you a sense of scale that tourism is going to be big, and the figures that we're getting in from China and India and Indonesia, you've heard it before, is massive. But we are right in the middle of it. This leads us to what I call the sustainability imperative. So, I like Earth. I think it's a really good planet. I wonder whether you have a favourite planet in the solar system. I like Earth because it's the air is free and the breathing is easy. But not all parts of the Earth are like that anymore. And that's kind of scary. As much as I like exploration to Mars and rocket technology, I'm not sure I really want to live on Mars or the Moon. I'm not sure about you guys. I think that we are spending a lot of time and money contemplating these exploration ideas, and that's a natural human condition to do so. But I think we should be spending a lot of time working out how we can maintain the place that we live in, because it actually happens to be a pretty good place to live already. And New Zealand is probably one of the best expressions of that. So I moved, just backtracking a little bit, this actually was my favourite building. This is Renzo Piano's building in New Caledonia. Has anyone seen this building or know this building? Yeah, it's pretty sweet. It was my favourite building in architecture while studying architecture. I loved it because it kind of combined all of the different aspects that I was really excited in. It was an environmental building. It used natural wind to ventilate. It also embraced the local culture and was a cultural centre to try and help to build and continue culture in that region. So I liked what it represented. But then I moved from that in a very roundabout way into tourism, as you know now. And I moved through it through sort of an environmental sort of field. And the reason I was on the move, not only because I was enjoying being in the outdoors and being a tourist at the time as well, the reason I moved was because when I was in design, I was trying the whole time to reintegrate natural systems into design. And then at a certain point, I actually just realized we don't need to do any of that. We just need to go out and see the natural systems around us and learn from those systems. So I suddenly found myself in tourism. So this is what I do now, and I will talk to you about that, and some of you know a little bit about that. That's in Queenstown, just around the corner from here. So this is what we do, and I'll explain a little bit about the background in a moment. So you can basically see it's kind of just like an extended Hilux ad. So this happens in an area that you guys probably know well. It's up at Skyline Gondola and goes up using a gondola. So that's the first part of a designed sustainability business. We use, and we don't realize that one of the huge aspects to impact is actually around transport. So we don't have to move any guests, which is a whole lot of less headache for us, a whole lot of less costs for us, and of course is the most sustainable way and actually the best experiential way to access a site. Then we actually are using gravity to move ourselves, which is useful and usually fun, gravity. And we build in live trees. So live trees are amazing because they're self-healing. You can tell the health of what's below by looking above. They wave around. They already are there, and they're really good structures. So we actually build tree houses and move from tree house to tree house. Whilst we're doing that, we actually talk to people about our business model and the things that I'm talking to you about now. We have solar panels in the trees right up the top, and that runs an electromagnetic gating system, Wi-Fi network, and other electrical things, low-power electrical things we have on site. We use timber as architecture, not only because timber's beautiful, but because it sequesters or holds carbon. And we talk about also the other significant social things, community things that we are involved in. So as a business, we were designed with sustainability from the first idea of what we were doing. And that was important because I think that if we use an architectural analogy, that right now we should legislate for good architecture should be built sustainably, and then we should go through systematically and retrofit everything so it's better design. The same goes with business. I think that we should be really trying to build sustainable businesses from the start. And then we should systematically go through and fix up every business so that they are reparatory for their environment, contributing to cultural and social value of that community. And I think that that's the best way to actually design new businesses. So, when you see other businesses, and this is a really interesting new article and a really strong move from Air New Zealand, and this is just in the Kia Ora magazine this month, we can see a big company with kind of big issues, right? Carbon. It's the obvious and big one. They're actually hitting it head on. And I'm really impressed with what Air New Zealand is doing in terms of leading the way, not only for our country, but honestly for the world and for the airline industry. They're doing so much good stuff around this. And they're covering all aspects from support of things in Antarctica, Department of Conservation stuff. They're really aware of all of the ways in which they can connect with their community, reduce their impact, and empower people all the way. And I'm really impressed with what Air New Zealand is doing as a company. This movie came out a few years ago. Has anyone seen this movie? The Last Paradise? Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I'm really interested in this concept of New Zealand as being one of the last paradises on Earth. Now, at once, I'm excited by that, but at once it makes me very, very sad, right? Why should New Zealand be the last haven of clean water and clean air, arable land, and fresh produce, you know? And once again, I'm not saying it's the only place, not at all by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we have a specific role in the world to play when it comes down to showing people about how we live, and that the values that we all talk about are actually represented in the businesses that we apply to that land. So I'm interested in that, and I'm on this sort of personal mission to sort of almost have a look and learn about what the last paradise is on Earth. And I sometimes talk about the idea that it'd be really cool if we could be somewhere between Bhutan and Singapore. And I like the idea that we have this deep value system which is represented in legislation, which is represented in the ways in which business and communities work, and then the idea that we're really good at infrastructure and future planning, right? And I think that if we could take somewhere in between there, would be really, we have a great opportunity to be in an amazing place. I'm not saying we need to be anyone else specifically, but I'm just saying there's lots of international learnings. Anyway, it was an interesting movie, and it actually talked about tourism. It actually talked about the places that we live, the idea of risk and play. And it talked actually about the idea of degradation and what we are doing on those places as well. I thought it was an interesting study. Now, this sort of thing is representing us around the world. And I saw this and was pretty excited. So are you guys aware of the legislation or the thing that was passed the other day? It was pretty amazing. I didn't know anything about it until I saw it later after the fact. And this is the sort of stuff which is going around the world about New Zealand. Now that's pretty good, I would say. I was really interested in the idea. It actually has taken the land out of national parks system. And because you kind of think that the conservation system or the national park system will be the ultimate piece of protection for a piece of land. But this has been taken out of that and is now an entity in itself. Now that is quite amazing. I think it is unique in the world, and I'm not sure whether there's any other examples of that. But this is the sort of stuff which represents New Zealand in a good light, and I think that's really important. The challenge is we have to watch what we ask for, because sometimes when you ask for it and you haven't delivered, people get skeptical, especially in our transparent world that we live in now. So this is a cruise industry report which is well, you can read the title. It talks about sustainability and doesn't talk about sustainability, right? Now, interestingly, I was reading another cruise ship's sustainability report before that, and it looked quite good, but then when you broke it down, because it was very thick, had a lot of information and a lot of data, but nothing specifically about the big issues. And I talked about Air New Zealand dealing with carbon and the way in which it's impacting in that respect, but the cruise industry didn't talk about waste, was the criticism. Like, what you can imagine, that's a pretty big thing for a cruise ship or a moving city, waste. So I think, once again, there's great opportunity in sustainability and discussing it. We do have, whether we like it or not, and some people love it and some people don't, we do have 100% pure New Zealand as probably the strongest brand that any country in the world has ever had. And I think that it absolutely does relate to sustainability. And you can say it just is about experience or other things as well, 100% pure experiences. But from the outside, classically, you are what other people think you are, not what you write in your report. So if other people are thinking that we're delivering this sort of stuff, we should be delivering this stuff on a high level.
Trent, how do you manage the tension between one of our prized assets being our natural abundance and our tourism product, and yet at the other end, the commercialization of it and the exploitation potentially if it's overrepresented or tourism numbers get too large? You have a wonderful product, but you have to protect it so that many people can interact with it.
Yep.
What's the balance?
So this is and this is a very big question, which I think doesn't get asked very much. And you have to hit the elephants in the room, right? So this concept, from a biological perspective, you might call it carrying capacity. How many people can we handle in a small country? And the answer to that is there's many answers to that. I think that what we have to think about is how do we make sure, when we talk about numbers, we often talk about yield. Mm-hmm. We often talk about the value per dollar per day per head, right? What if we became a country that could support somehow a net interchange of value? For example, a very smart person or family or group of people may come in, but imagine if they could deliver something back to the community or citizens. Imagine if they could do ecological work, environmental work while they were here. And imagine if that was therefore cheaper for them. Mm-hmm. So then it doesn't become an elite thing. I can afford to do it, which is what kind of Bhutan has done, is they've said you need a minimum spend of X to be in Bhutan per day, which I think is a value as well. China, as I was saying to you before, Thailand has just brought that in for China tourists. A minimum spend so that they don't get the low value stuff. So assuming we get the value up so that there's some reason to have people, because there is an impact, imagine if they could contribute back to that in ways outside economic contribution. Mm. So I think there's some big things around how we interact with tourists, because you could say, right now, we could handle this many tourists practically, okay? But you might actually say, well, there's a whole lot of social impacts that are actually happening first, rather than the ecological ones. So, for example, in Queenstown, which I was saying before, is really quite a big challenge. We're growing very, very fast. And we're starting to get feedback from people who are not in tourism, although everyone's kind of in tourism, as I discussed before, even construction, for example. We're starting to get feedback that they don't want tourists, or they want less people, or they don't want certain people. I'm not sure if they've really thought about that, because usually their jobs depend on it. But I do think it's a very good question, and it has to be broken down into many different parts. Mm. Is there any other, some people would say we should shut our borders at this time. Does anyone have strong views on the way in which we should handle numbers of people coming to New Zealand? So the balance, right?
No, ballot.
Oh, ballot.
So it's not based on income, it's based on, so you open the opportunity up to people with lower incomes or different values. So you ballot it instead of just being a dollar system.
Yeah, no. So the idea of a ballot system for tourism, I think, is maybe a great one we should at least talk about. If we need to go down that direction, that's an interesting thing to do. Once again, that's sort of what Bhutan has. Bhutan has a system where I'm not sure whether it's mythical, actually. I have been to Bhutan, but I'm not sure of this whole idea that they only let a certain amount of people per year. I'm pretty sure that never existed. I think that there's always been an economic barrier to going there. So when you go to Bhutan, when you buy a trip to Bhutan, it's like all done. It's all packaged. And you're like, I'm a free independent traveler. I like to sort of wander around, right? And I was like, I'm not sure if I really want to do this. I'm not sure if I really want to support this. I really kind of, we're all probably people that would love to just float around, right? But what actually happens is you get a guide and they come with you the whole way. And they actually kind of treat you like family. You get all your transport, all of your food, and everything, all the tours and entries and everything. Now, I would argue that that's actually a beautifully hosted experience. And the guides that you have are highly respected in their communities. They're very well educated, and it's a very good thing to represent your country in tourism there. So it's a very different system. So anyway, it's something that we should contemplate and at least have a conversation around.
Is your view that our industry of tourism is at a point now that it needs radical disruption? Because I would argue if we move to a ballot, which is an interesting opportunity, or you're saying You have to have a minimum spend to visit our country. They're fundamental flips on our very open, come and experience it because we're at the distant end of the world. Are we at that point now that we have to be disrupted?
I think that if we're not disrupted by something as significant as that, we are heading down a path that may be dangerous. And I don't know the answer to how dangerous that will be, but I know for sure there's a cultural kickback already, and it won't be far between before we start to see maybe environmental effects as well, and maybe then therefore a loss in economic value. I would argue that we don't want to be the Cancun or the Turkey of the world where places are destroyed. Like, we can't do that, can we? Like, we don't have a right to do that to start with. Should we do that? I don't know. Some people would say, oh no, we're fine. We can handle a whole lot more people. Here's the challenge. When you look at the places in the world that people want to go on a list of top 10, and then you see the places in the world that people have been to, we are pretty much the largest gap in that gap analysis. The challenge and opportunity exists that we could have a lot more people here, which might be really bad and might be really good depending on which side of the coin maybe, or which camp you're in. But we are probably under threat more on this than almost any other place on Earth. And I was talking to you, Simon, about the idea of Iceland as well, because Iceland has now gone through a massive transition to tourism in a short amount of time, probably in the last 5 years, I'd say. And Iceland is going through this thing where tourism is now the thing to do. And so heavy industries are falling away and tourism is part of it. Now, we can all argue, and me in tourism would say, we can add value. We absolutely can add value, not just economically. We absolutely can. But you have to be rigorous in doing that. I don't think there's been many examples in the world where tourism on large scale has improved a location, and many more examples where it's detracted from a location. Yeah. There's also another example of an island in Greece that is now paying retrospectively for the damage that people have done previously, and they pitch it almost as badly as that. Right. So the island has completely been destroyed or is degraded, and so people are paying a tax to improve the quality of that place, which you could argue is what they should be doing, but also just the idea of paying in posthumously a tax so that people who have been before you aren't destroying this place is not a very good pitch.
Freedom campers and that sort of thing as well?
Absolutely. Freedom campers, there's a big whole lot of challenges around that, and I think maybe different regions are covering that differently. I think that what we need to do is recognise that on Earth, not just Dunedin or New Zealand or whatever, on Earth, all elements of freedom, all elements of natural quiet, all elements of water and food are under challenge because there's more people on Earth than there's ever been before. And they're becoming more affluent and moving around. Just as we feel like we need a right to be able to go overseas when we want with our passport, they feel they have a right to do so too. So this becomes a Dunedin, Otago, South Island, New Zealand, Southern Hemisphere. It expands upon everything. So humans have to get better at conflict of use and managing that. And part of that is understanding the impacts, both negative and positive, of, in our case, tourism and business, and taking responsibility for that. So yes, freedom camping, I made it into a global thing. But yes, it's a big challenge, and we need to manage it. And I think we need to stand up and ask the big questions in the room. Okay. So I'm going to whip you to a different world again, a technological imperative. what's happening now, and you've heard it now and you've heard it before, you've heard about exponential growth and the technologies that are impacting us. Like most of us have smartphones in our pocket, a computer which is far greater than anything that was on the first missions to the moon. We are all, most of us are on social networks and connected by so many things. Every day, whether you like it or not, there's big AI engines holding your data and processing it and doing all sorts of stuff with it. And there's a whole lot of challenges to do with that and your ownership of your own data as well. Here's an example. For 1995 or something like that, I was in the States and was really excited about, I was a bit of a geek maybe, I was really excited about going to see some VR thing where you get to put this headset on and walk around this virtual environment. And the whole thing was, this thing's going to change our world tomorrow, and we're all going to be walking around in the forest and experiencing things on the moon through these goggles, and it's going to be ubiquitous and everywhere, right? Didn't happen. And what that's called is, in this example, the trough of disappointment. Okay, we've had a whole lot of, like, the technology for a phone has probably existed for a lot longer than it actually was commercialized and in your hand. All technologies go through this point where it was discovered and everyone thinks we're going to have solar panel clothing, right? But it takes a long time for that to develop, and there's a whole lot of commercial reasons and there's a whole lot of cultural reasons. The Google glasses got culturally knocked out, right? They were a great idea, you may argue they're not, concept, but they were actually decided that they culturally didn't really fit and there was really no market, so they put that on the back burner probably until the next 5 years. But what is happening now is we're hitting a little edge here where things are crossing over, and things will cross over a lot faster than we expect, because that's the whole thing about exponential growth as opposed to linear growth, right? This is going to affect not just tourism, not just business, but every one of your lives as we go forward. Here's another example of a technology that is now out and being tested.
Look around. Technology is all around us. We use it in every aspect of our lives. It enables us to do amazing things. But what if we could go further? What if we could go beyond the screen? Where your digital world is blended with your real world. Now we can. This is the world with holograms. What will they enable us to do? New ways to visualize our work.
I have an idea for the fuel tank.
New ways to share ideas with each other.
How are things going your end?
I just put the images in OneDrive.
Perfect.
More immersive ways to play. New ways to teach and learn.
So put the new trap in the place of the old one.
Now what?
And tighten here and here.
New ways to collaborate and explore the places we've never been.
So
look at this formation.
I'm glad they did that plumbing theme, because otherwise you're like, wait a second, what's the functional use of this? Like, what are we actually learning here? How is it actually improving my life? I like the idea that I could probably change the U-bend if I got the right download. Maybe I could fix my car, which I obviously can't do right now. But the functional uses and the commercial uses of this technology honestly hasn't been even conceived yet. We don't even really know. Most of this functionality in terms of the HoloLens is actually possible right now. This is a mock-up, but it is possible right now. Has anyone used HoloLens as an example?
This is Microsoft HoloLens.
Unbelievable. Like, you put it on and you'll see that triangle thing that happened, so you put it on and you look around the room and it actually is mapping all of the physical environment around you with little triangles, like you're in a computer game. And then you can put anything on any one surface, and or look through behind a surface and see dinosaurs running behind it, right? So once again, that's just the fun bit. But the whole idea that these things actually can have a functional use and can improve, this is called mixed reality, can improve or augment or change the way in which we interact with any environment, thing, or things that are not even there, right? Like things in history, things in the future. Imagine what happens when tourism does at least partially go virtual. That's going to change a whole lot of things for a whole lot of people, and we do need to consider how that might actually happen. Now, I don't think it necessarily will replace, in the immediate term at least, the actual experience of going on Ziptrek. But what it might do is it might get me excited about going to that place and seeing the Niagara Falls, Eiffel Tower, Grand Canyon. It also will be an additional experience that we can gain in post. So imagine if my time in Piopiotahi, Milford Sound, was relived through a virtual thing that I could put my goggles in. So I go there and I experience it, and then I take it home and or share it with other people. I think it has a chance to extend an experience and give you an ability to relive a memory. And that's pretty important and exciting, I think. So that's just one example of how technology may affect it's very physical technology. This is something which is quite different again, and you guys all know it. But have a look at some of the value stuff in this. So this is sharing economy. It's not anyone specifically, it's everybody. It's really hard to hit with a conversation. And I know that our town in Queenstown is being significantly affected by it. I'm certain that the Dunedin is also having, and this region is having, possibly challenges, possibly opportunities. I'm not really even sure. What this example shows is the way in which a deep value system and a way of expressing it can be expressed through the technologies to enable it. The idea that people in tourism are not business people, but they're Joe on the street with an extra room, I think is very interesting. I actually stayed in an Airbnb on the weekend in Dunedin. It was awesome. It was an 8-bedroom place right in the city. And it overlooked everything, and I shouldn't be probably saying that. Maybe I'll get in trouble from a lot of people on that. But my experience with Airbnb personally, from a consumer perspective, has been amazing. I've stayed on a yacht in Sydney. I've stayed in shops, above shops in these tiny little streets in Shanghai. I've stayed in amazing apartments in Wellington. I've stayed in a couple of not very good places as well. But just like any other hotel, I've probably stayed in as many good ones as I have bad ones. So in terms of the consumer end, it's pretty good. In terms of the challenges around how that's changing rates or changing availability of accommodation for workers or other stuff like that, there's a whole lot of other pieces to it. But the thing about it is Airbnb is actually very interested in a conversation around how they're affecting a community. And I encourage you all to engage with them, because the way in which the sharing economy is affecting tourism, experience, travel, and in fact your own local lives is yet undiscovered already, right? So we need to keep an eye on sharing economy and how that might change the way in which maybe we'll never buy a lawnmower again. Like, who has a lawnmower that sits in the shed for 99% of the time? It's a little bit crazy, honestly, and it's really not very sustainable, and it's probably quite expensive when you add it all up. So anyway, there's a whole lot of things that will happen out of sharing economy which will absolutely affect tourism and business delivery.
I guess but that's also one of the, I mean, Airbnb would have to be one of the world's most disruptive business models for tourism, wouldn't it? It's now the world's largest hotelier. It doesn't own any bedrooms. There was a recent article written in Fast Company talking about the fact that if Airbnb wants to put out another 400 rooms, it costs them nothing. If the Hilton Group wants to put another 400 rooms, that's a multi-million-dollar exercise. So big disruptive plays in this category are possible, aren't they?
Yeah, I think the largest piece of the cost, the infrastructure itself, like it is not there. Then there's so many pieces to it that work. What is discovered is a whole lot of things that are really kind of painful for communities to go through. But the idea that, you can stay on a yacht, so unique experience stuff, personalized experience stuff where you're a guide. And Airbnb is pushing out really hard. They've got Airbnb guides now. Do you know about Airbnb guides? Not that old. Airbnb co-working spaces. Okay, once again, watch these guys. Everything's moving so fast. Like, these probably two things have come out in the last month or two, but or so far as I recall anyway. So I think that absolutely there's going to be some challenges, but there's massive opportunities in these, and I think we have to think about how it may fit within the mix, because nothing's as simple as it was before. If you're a business used to deliver a service, right? It's not like that anymore. Anything could come from anywhere. I'm not sure if people want to put their hand up. Who stayed in Airbnbs before? Yeah? Good experiences? Yeah? Generally good experiences? Bad experiences? Yeah. Both? Yeah. I won't ask who rents out their room because I'll get people in trouble. I think that we need to, as an industry, tourism industry, we need to engage with these conversations again and really get on the front foot of it. I actually talked to Tourism New Zealand around this, about do we have anyone representing sharing economy businesses in tourism or organisations in tourism? Not right now, but maybe in the future.
Right.
I think it's an interesting question because there's an underlying hidden economy there at the moment, and part of that's exposed by the Spark Initiative, Curious, the data that you guys are pulling out of mobile technology. We look at it as a destination, and we can see through that data by comparing commercial accommodation and the data that you're pulling in terms of non-commercial stays, there's a gap there, and it's currently hidden.
Yeah, and that's one of the most powerful pieces you can have is the mobile data, right? And then bringing that forward in a meaningful way, so it's interpretive. And then who owns that data again, right? I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Who owns that information? If when I travel somebody, should everyone know about that travel? If it's anonymous, is that okay? I don't know. I think that data collection and ownership is one of the huge things that's going to move us forward. We need to deal with as we move forward.
It's also a little bit disingenuous calling it a sharing economy when it's actually a commercial economy, because people aren't doing it for nothing.
For sure. So there's definitely both all ends of spectrum, and I have been in all ends of spectrum where you can absolutely tell this is a commercial operation. Possibly not paying all of the rates that they should be. Airbnb really wants to handle that stuff and directly deal with that stuff. They don't want to be underhanded in the way in which they do that, but they have to be engaged in a dialogue around it as well, because they're not breaking any laws right now. And so the other way is to bring in laws that stop these disruptive technologies like a drone rule, no drones, right? Okay. Or Airbnb, no Airbnb. But I personally think that's not a good idea. We should engage in the conversation and talk about the spectrum from Jenny, who has an extra bedroom, which she sometimes rents out because she's trying to supplement her ridiculous mortgage that everyone's over mortgaged on, because that's the way our economy works also. But that's legal. And then you get to another situation where you've got commercial accommodation people who are handling multiple places. I've been to places in China that are, yeah, this is a commercial deal, isn't it? I mean, the sharing economy existed before as well. I've stayed in a guy's house in Russia, in Moscow, no, St. Petersburg, and he literally slept on the couch while I was in the bedroom. We were in the bedroom. And so that's always existed, but there's a system for it now, so it's scaled it. Yes. It's enabled it to be scaled, and that's quite a different thing.
They might not be breaking the laws, they're enabling people to break the laws, or at least to tax rules.
So
they're enabling people to break tax rules or break laws. So
yep.
they're enabling in that way as well.
Yep, yeah. And so once again, there's so many ethical questions around it, and once again, I think that asking those big questions and saying, hey, wait a second, are you just trying to rot the system? Because obviously that's not the intent. Then we have to work out, there's either legislate rules around it and or work out rules of engagement.
But you're right. They're similar to Air New Zealand. They're taking the conversation to the market.
Yeah.
So that's the important thing, I think, and that's the differentiating thing with Air New Zealand as an airline globally and with Airbnb globally as a disruptor. They're taking the conversation.
Yep, and classically on the other end of the scale, Uber, which is not very good at it at all, for lots of different reasons.
There's some incredible articles which we'll post up on the Spark Lab Facebook site and Twitter feeds around the disruptive effect that Airbnb has had on the tourism market. Not only what has it done to the hoteliers, but what has it done to food and beverage, what has it done to peripheral services around accommodation. So some fantastic reading. And
conversely, and once again, I'm not just behind behind something, it's a good idea. It's not that simple. But there was, I saw another report just this week that said that it hasn't, by data, it really hasn't affected hotels. Airbnb has not affected hotels.
Right.
That increasing demand in most places in the world has increased rates, and that hotels haven't been affected. Now, I'm sure that people will argue against that data or that research that was done, and I'm sure there's another piece of data that says it has affected it. But I just think it's important to really understand the whole picture and directly talk to people about it, engage.
And interestingly, at the PATA presentation, Airbnb presented,
yeah.
And they are having a conversation with hotels, and in some places globally, hotels are using Airbnb to list their rooms.
I know people in commercial tourism who are using Airbnb as their resource, yes. And they don't care, or they haven't done anything different, but they're normal businesses that we all know, and they're using these sharing economies. Imagine if I started coordinating Uber to pick up my people or something. It gets very complex very fast. So I'm just going to talk to you briefly about the magic in the middle. So the magic in the middle is all around how we have these conversations and how we integrate all of these crazy things that are happening around us. So I've got here two areas, sort of the tourism movements and trends, and there's a whole lot of more. And then some of the digital trends and the way in which we're interacting. I was talking to you before about even the idea that you own your data. So has anyone seen Minority Report, the movie? Yep. So in the Minority Report, it identifies your eyeball as you walk in and says, hello, Mr. Yeo, would you like another pair of pants to go with that suit that you bought last week? Doesn't say that, but that's what it does. In theory, the idea that personalised service becomes part of the norm and integrated experiences become part of the process in tourism and travel. But I want to challenge this and always make sure that people are aware that, once again, who owns the data? And would I have a chance to control that data? And this leads to encryption through blockchain, for example. And I won't go into that too much. But it leads to all these other things as well. I've got cryptocurrencies generally like Bitcoin. Does anyone know anyone who takes Bitcoin in this region? Yeah? Cool. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying you should. I'm not sure it's going to change your business, but I think it's really important to know what these cryptocurrencies are doing. People who travel internationally don't want to have to exchange stuff. It's kind of nice to just have one currency that rules them all. It's an interesting discussion for tourism. Once again, sharing economy, location independent. I think that people are moving around a lot more, and somebody might live in multiple countries all the time. So are they a tourist, or are they working, or are they, I don't know what they are. Like, so people who aren't defined by the normal silos that we put them in. So I just wanted to put up, obviously, some important concepts. When I arrived into tourism, kaitiakitanga and manakitanga were at the forefront of tourism's goals or values and discussion, and they have fallen off now. And it doesn't matter what you call them. I think they're vitally important. I'm going to give you one example, not two examples, and I'll finish with this one. Anyone seen this?
Willkommen im Bündnerland. Ja, guten Tag, schöne Frau. Guten Morgen. Morgen, Bro. Hey, Allegra, ich kurz Zeit. Ja, du. Hallo. Darf ich einladen? Ja, privat. Du musst hier nicht auf Frieden. Einladen, das Billett draussen. Okay.
Oh, jetzt ist es gut.
Ja, das ist gültig heute.
Nur heute.
Heute habe ich nie Zeit.
Oh, I'm saying, komm zu dir.
Jetzt gerade.
Das ist ein bisschen spontan. Danke vielmals.
Ich möchte einfach auf den Zug.
Okay. Können Sie mit meinem Chef reden?
Ja, kann man doch geschwind anrufen. Das ist nicht so wichtig mit dem Chef. 044
446.
Silbermann, der kommt heute Nachmittag mit in die Schule. Dann kann ich auf dich rechnen.
Ich weiß es nicht.
Das ist mit Kinderkrippe da. In einer Viertelstunde fährt der Zug. Das haben wir gerade noch.
Also dann bis nachher.
Ja, dann kommen wir.
Ja, ist gut.
Bis nachher.
Also wir kommen.
Hey, super. Ja, das ist super.
Tschüss.
Hey, ciao. Ja, hallo. Hey, willkommen.
Hallo, danke.
Gute Reise.
Ja.
Ja, das ist gut.
Hey.
Ja, weiß nicht. Perfekt.
So who wants to go there? So firstly, New Zealand should have an awesome rail system right up the guts. Who votes for that one? Yeah, so all hands in the room. Okay, great. So we should put a rail system all the way up and down New Zealand's spine. I've seen, when I show this, I've seen tears. Everyone smiles. It's so beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful campaigns you've ever seen for a small place called Graubünden. Don't know where that is. It's in Switzerland, but I'm not sure exactly where it is. I should look it up. I think it really represents some of the things that we have going for us, this sense of welcome, our relaxed nature, all sorts of different things. But I think what they've done here is really found a way to connect to people and make sure that that it becomes a human experience of interchange. And I think that when we get into tourism, we often talk about dollars or value and all this sort of stuff. But we've got to think about how we as Kiwis can represent our place in a way that we're really proud of. Just like, and I say this at Ziptrek, treating people just like they're your family, like your brother, your sister, your mother, your auntie, because that's quite a different way in which to see tourism, I think. And I think we often forget it when we think about the numbers and scale and complexity of our delivery, is we often forget about the people. So I'm going to skip to there. And then, in summary, I'd like to say that tourism is a lot of things to a lot of people, but it affects people more than we even realise. The view of a place, whether it's Switzerland, maybe I think chocolates and mountains, right, is wholly different the day I get off the train at Dunedin. Sorry about my German or something there. And it is so different. The human experience of being in that place is unlike anything that we'll ever see, whether it's virtual, augmented, or it's a story from another person. So we have a great opportunity to really represent our values. And I think one of the best ways to do it is through tourism, the idea of the experience. And I think we should be delivering a whole lot more. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and to you, Trent. Tourism is a dear topic to many of our hearts, whether we work in it or we're affected by it because we live in this wonderful country. And so this morning, to have such a divergent consideration set from the effect of technology to disruptive business models, should we introduce ballots, should we have a minimum spend, interesting questions that I think, to your point, if they're not at some stage asked, they'll never be answered. So our sincere thanks. If you could join me again to the speaker this morning. And in the spirit of appreciation, and this is sort of an unapologetic thank you to any Spark customer that is in the room. And the reason we say that is the only reason we've been able to put on close to 160 of these events is one Spark customer asked for it and another said it would be a good idea. And in the sort of the lean iterative model, we started it up, we tested it, we learned, we've iterated, we've moved it on. So thank you, because if it wasn't of value, then these things would stop. To that extent, there is again, the Mobi site you came in on, there is a panel here that asks for feedback. And so the only exchange we asked really out of this morning, apart from leaving with some inspiration, are your thoughts. Because if there's things this morning that you think that we could do better, or there's topics you'd like us to cover in the future, would you like us to come back, please, that's our opportunity to know it. And it really does help. By notion of the sharing economy, that is the exchange. There's also a small incentive there that anyone that does enter their feedback will be up for a $250 Spark credit. So if the carrot helps, there it is. We have 2 more Spark Lab events on later today. We have a session starting at 10:30, which is on Social Media 101. And the idea of Social Media 101 is the opportunity to ask those questions that perhaps that we presume we should know the answer to, but don't necessarily want to, again, ask our kids or our colleagues or our boss. And then this evening, we have an amazing gentleman, Saray Avery. Saray is one of our principal contributors to Spark Lab. He's toured through New Zealand with us, and he's on tonight from 6 o'clock. So once again, our sincere thanks for coming along this morning to our guest speaker. Thank you, Trent. Hopefully you'll stay in touch, and we'd love to see you back. Thank you very much.